Hi guys, I want to talk about Saxon's brand new album, Hellfire and Damnation. So I will give my first impressions, talk about the standout tracks, and give it my score and rating. And I also want to discuss, have they turned a little bit darker and heavier than before, but then sound a little bit more like bands like Judas Priest or even Megadeth. Saxon are one of the pioneers of new wave of British heavy metal, along with, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and a lot of other bands, Diamond Head, for example. It's their 24th album with original material. They made 2 cover albums in the last 2 years, and then they came out with another album 2 years ago called Carpe Diem. I always felt with Saxon somehow that they're a little bit on the fringes. They never kind of reached that same mainstream popularity like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, but they kind of kept going, 24 albums in. So Hellfire and Damnation came out on Friday, the 19th of January, and it's produced by Andy Sneap. He's no beginner. He's done Testament, Megadeth, Amon Amarth, Machine Head, and the last few albums of Judas Priest. It has 10 tracks, it's 42.5 minutes. The cover is sort of dark and gloomy. It has some warrior that has wings on him fighting with some beasts that are, I don't know, they look a little bit like some sort of bats or something like that. And there is fire burning under them, so can I only assume that this is happening in hell. So my first impressions of listening to this album is that I feel that it's overall a little bit darker and heavier than Carpe Diem that came 2 years ago. And I feel that the arrangements are very spacious. There's a lot of these kind of dual guitar harmonies, but you hear all the instruments really nicely in this. And Biff's vocals sit really, really nicely on top, and they're super, super raspy on this album. The drummer, Nigel Clocker, I saw them live 2 years ago. He's just outstanding, and he really shines on this album. The lyrics on this album are very kind of history-based somehow. You have songs like 1066, year 1066, where the Normans fought the Saxons, the Battle of Hastings. There is Pirates of the Airwaves, that is about these illegal radio stations that operated in open waters to circumvent the music industry control over what music was being played on the radio. And then you have Madame Guillotine, that is about the guillotine that they used in the French Revolution to execute all the aristocrats. Now for the standout tracks, I would mention first Madame Guillotine. It's about that, French Revolution thing, and that starts with a really cool bass and then kind of builds into a very chugging riff. And when the lyrics come in, he says, they call me death, I come to collect your debt. It's a really, really cool entry into the song somehow. Has a very catchy chorus, and then at times the chug somehow reminds me a little bit of Megadeth, like Angry Again, Symphony of Destruction or something like that. The title track that came out as a single actually is also super heavy, Hellfire and Damnation. But when I heard that song the first time, I was like, okay, they're taking a different direction on this album, and has a really, really kind of Judas Priest vibey thing around it somehow. My third standout track is There Is Something in Roswell. That's gonna be a straight out live banger. I think it's gonna sound great live. That's about events that happened in 1947, I think, in New Mexico in the US, where some Navy balloon fell and everybody thought it was UFOs. But it's actually, listening to the lyrics of that song is really, really cool. So my summary and rating on this album. So overall, I think this is a great album for a bunch of guys that are like 70 plus years old, and 24th album in their catalog. It's crispy but dark and has a super heavy sound. What I like also that Biff does is that he doesn't try anything that he can't handle on this. So I think all of the songs of this album will be good live, because there is nothing that I think has been kind of fiddled with in the studio somehow. I like the historical aspect of the lyrics. The songs are kind of short and straight to the point, so you never really get bored with anything. Nothing really drags out. On the other hand, my minor criticism of this album would be that some of the songs could have been arranged and transitioned a little bit differently, so that they wouldn't feel as basic, let's say. And I felt that, they could have taken some of the songs into some longer stuff. I'm gonna give this album 8.5 out of 10. It's definitely a development. It's heavier than the last album, and I think, I'm gonna see them live now in March, and they're probably gonna be great. Now, how has this band become heavier and darker, and why does that maybe come at the price of sounding a little bit more like bands like Judas Priest or even Megadeth? Obviously, after 24 albums, you kind of keep developing something, you keep pushing, I guess, otherwise it would become boring. But also in the meantime, since they started and until now, there's been a lot of technology. Now you can get a plug-in and you will sound like this guitar player, you will sound like that band. You don't even need to tune in your amps or your effects or anything. It's all in the computer. So that kind of often, I feel, moves music very much in the same direction. They got this new guitar player in on this album, Brian Tatler, who was a founding member of Machine Head. And I think that contributes a lot to this, because when you bring a new guy into something like this that has been rolling for a while, is always gonna be bound to bring something new to the table. And thirdly, I think one of the things that kind of brings them closer to Judas Priest and even then Megadeth, as I said, on some of the songs, is that Andy Sneap has worked with both of those bands. And he was actually, I didn't know that when I started this video, but Andy Sneap was actually working with Megadeth kind of back in those days where they were doing this kind of Angry Again stuff, or not the super thrashy speed metal stuff, but more kind of the heavy metal stuff. So in some way, yeah, they're getting closer to the other bands, but still it's Saxon. They still look over their shoulder, they still have their own style of doing it, and Biff's vocals, of course, give it a very special flavor somehow. So please guys, like and subscribe. I love comments also. I would be curious what you think about this album. What are your standout songs? And check out my Defender of the Faith 40th anniversary rewind on the Judas Priest album, or my KK's Priest, The Sinner Rides Again video where I cover that album.